Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be around the globe, in the chat room, on another planet, or on the other side. This is Late Night in the Midlands, and I am Michael Vera, and I do welcome you all, wherever it is you may be. This broadcast is coming at you live from the East Coast of the United States, the capital city, Columbia, South Carolina. And again, I do welcome everyone. The website's www.latenightinthemidlands.com. Go on over, become a late nighter, be informed, and by all means, inform others. Tonight, we should have guest Heather Giamboi, I think it is how it's said, joining us to talk about out-of-body travel. How about other planets and involving extraterrestrials with all of this? Well, that's the kind of the pitch tonight, I think, with Heather. But it sounds like it'll be a good show. So that's what we're looking forward to doing tonight. I've got some news to get into, which I will do. And folks, again, I am, don't get me wrong, I'm going to certainly report on current events and stuff like that, but as far as the hardcore politics, I'm telling you, I need to just set back on that for a little while. I'm glad it's all over with. I really am. I'm glad that it's all over with, and I'm glad that it went the way I was hoping it would go. Trump's not in office yet. He is president-elect. He is not the president yet, so that's still Barack Obama's job until, I think, January 20th. So until that day comes, right now, we'll just keep our eye on Obama because really he's the one who's got control of all the buttons right now. Supermoon exposes UFO-like object passing by. A supermoon-loving stargazer managed to capture what he claimed to be a UFO when viewing the moon in Arizona on Saturday night. Let's see, the Randoman, I think it is, YouTube channel here uploaded the footage of two objects passing the moon within a short period on November 12th. And there's video with it, so you can go check it out on latenightinthemidlands.com under News and Discovery. I tried to look at the moon, but it was cloudy. And then when there was a little break, it was so far away, behind trees and stuff. That's the way it is. When there's something happening, you always end up getting clouds for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it was on purpose. Anybody have a clear sky, I guess? I don't know. I didn't. I never do for these things. It's clear all the time, but as soon as they announce something spectacular is going to happen in space, that's it. Clouds. Anyhow, folks, I've got Heather joining me next. All right, so with that, folks, we'll be talking about out-of-body travel, extraterrestrials, other planets, all that good stuff when we return. I'm Michael Vera. This is Late Night in the Midlands on the LNM radio network. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stick around.
The LNM Radio Network offers a chat room for you, the listener, to connect with others whom are interested in the topics and guests that the LNM Radio Network brings to you. During the live shows, the hosts will even visit the chat room and chat with you, the listener. Click on the big red Chat and Listen button at the top of the website and join us. No subscription is needed at either lnmradionetwork.com or latenightinthemidlands.com.
Why subscribe to Late Night in the Midlands, you ask? Well, I'll tell you why. Late Night in the Midlands covers everything, and through the thousands of expert guests who have joined Michael Vera on his show, come pieces of the big puzzle, which started many years ago. Michael and his guests reveal information dating back to the beginning of time. To this very moment, Michael Vera not only brings you the best guests with the best information, but Michael is not afraid to call out those who are less than honest. You see, in this day and age, we need a radio show we can count on and a radio host we can trust to expose the truth one show at a time. So, become a late nighter and subscribe now. Talk radio like no other. Late Night in the Midlands, bringing the truth back to talk radio.
Attention LNM Radio Network listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the LNM Radio Network by calling 605-562-4203? No smartphone app or internet needed. Call 605-562-4203 to listen to the LNM Radio Network on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Chief, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
And I would have got away with it, too, if it wasn't for those meddling radio show hosts.
On the east coast of the United States, from the capital city, Columbia, South Carolina, you're listening to Late Night in the Midlands with your host, Michael Vera. To talk to Michael Vera, dial 803-392-4566. Or around the world on Skype. Just use Skype ID LNM Radio.
And we're back. This is Late Night in the Midlands. I'm Michael Vera, and we're always taking cover. We get all kinds of stuff thrown our way. And, it could sometimes be a task trying to figure out what's what. And so who knows if tonight will be another one of those nights where you get thinking, but you're not sure. I don't know. You'll have to tell me, I guess. We'll take calls later. The call-in number's 803-392-4566. Skype ID, LNM Radio. You can call in that way. After the next break, we'll take calls. Not right now. Shout out to our radio affiliates. High Point Radio, the top of New Jersey. They bring us into New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. They do it on 1620 AM, 100.5 FM, WAFR 87.5 FM, Wareham, Massachusetts. They bring us in Monday through Friday live. And K98 Talk on the internet. And, of course, the LNM Radio Network. That is the mothership. That's where it all comes from. And there's so much more greatness there. So please go check out the LNM Radio Network. And, like after tonight, Dr. J will be following tonight's show. Other nights, we've got a lot of live shows on this network, too. So we've got a lot of great shows on this network. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And I appreciate everybody giving the other shows a chance, too. Because I'll tell you, it could get addicting. Before you know it, that's why it's good to have the subscription, because you can go back into the archives later. It's hard to listen to everything, isn't it? And you kind of almost want to. Anyhow, I want to tell you a little bit about my guest tonight, and I'm going to do my best with the name here. Heather Giamboi, I think it is a soul travel agent. An accomplished soul traveler over several decades, she is an author and spiritual teacher of a highly freeing form of advanced spiritual travel to heavens. She speaks and teaches on the subjects of out-of-body travel, self-realization, reincarnation, how to become a spiritual traveler, and returning to God. Heather is a spiritual traveler, teacher, and the president of VARDANKAR, I think that is. Alan Fieldman, her husband, is the head spiritual teacher and the head of VARDANKAR. VARDANKAR, I think it is, helping individuals experience extraordinary worlds of consciousness and heavens of pure spirit. So, folks, with that, I want to bring Heather on, and she could correct any of my mistakes I may have made. And again, we'll take calls later on in the show. Heather, I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands, and I thank you for being here tonight. Hello? Heather, are you there?
You can't hear me?
No.
Hello?
Yes.
I'm talking to you.
You good? Can you hear me? Hold on, folks. We'll get this worked out. Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
You there?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you fine. The question is, can you hear me?
I can hear you. No problem.
I think we're good then.
Right.
Nothing. Oh, don't you love technology? Isn't it wonderful?
It's exciting. Sometimes too exciting.
Oh, I know it. I know it. Well, listen, I thank you for being here tonight. I'm looking forward to speaking with you, and really thank you for taking out the time and going crazy with the technology to make it happen.
Thank you for having me. And
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, well, listen, I thought a great place to start would be with a little bit of background. Perhaps, take us through your journey. I mean, how did you get to where you are now in all of this? And what exactly are we talking about? So, yeah, give us a little background on it all.
Sure. I've been practicing an advanced form of out-of-body travel for about 20 years, over 20 years. Visiting what people who have near-death experiences call heaven, but it's different than astral projection. It's soul movement, and I guess just to give you an example of the type of what I mean by soul movement, I could share an experience that I had early on.
Oh yes, please.
Well, many years ago, I was actually right in the middle of a large hotel conference room, sitting in a crowd of people sitting in chairs. And above my head there was this crystal chandelier, and I was just sitting there, and I just closed my eyes and just started to do sort of a visualization. And as I closed my eyes, I visualized a very dark woods and a dark house, and I was walking into the house, and then I imagined that there was this trunk that was like an elephant's trunk, and that it was just sucking the fog right out of the house. And then as this was happening here, I'm just daydreaming and imagining this. All of a sudden, something shifts, something changes, and it switches from imagination to an actual out-of-body experience, where as the fog is being sucked right out of the house, and everything completely changes, suddenly the walls that are dark and foggy become crystal clear like glass from the floor to the ceiling. And all of a sudden the fog is just gone, and I see for thousands and thousands of miles in every single direction just this beautiful, pure landscape of sparkling light. And it just goes on for miles and miles with all these shining light particles, and I feel this feeling of serenity and joy, and I hear this heavenly melody. And this out-of-body experience, I experienced what's called the soul plane, which is a heavenly realm or heaven of self-realization. And it really moved me having that experience. And actually, this whole process of finding out about this past life had to do with out-of-body travel, because we experienced that as a result. Because my husband and I, we were writing a book about visiting heaven. And when we reached the third chapter, we both saw the same past life that we shared a long time ago. We saw what are called the soul records. They're different than the Akashic records of a past life. I know this is going to sound really far out, but it was a past life 100 million years ago on a very ancient planet of ancient aliens.
Oh, wow. Well, no, I'm telling you, you're in the right place. I don't think this stuff's crazy. I mean, who am I to judge? I mean, this stuff, you know. But so, where was when you had this out of body experience? Like, explain a little bit. Like, what was going on with your physical body? Where was? I mean, were you standing? Did you fall? I mean, what happened with the physical body? Were you relaxed?
Well, I can explain it like this. When there are, how can I put it? There are advanced techniques, and when you get further along in learning some of these techniques, you can actually do these exercises while you're awake and talking with people. So you can be dwelling in certain levels of heaven. It's called dual awareness. While you're simultaneously aware of this level of heaven, you're also maybe talking to somebody or doing something in life. So we were actually experiencing this dual awareness when we had that experience.
Oh, I see. So then and that's controlling, actually, these out of body experiences. I mean, if you're awake, right? I mean, I've heard of people I've heard of people who are close to, they always say, well, you get real close to that sleeping state and then all of a sudden you leave your body. I've tried to control out-of-body experiences, and I've never had any luck. I lose my patience with it, but it's happened when I wasn't in control of it a couple times.
Well, related to that, it's because it sometimes can require practice and training. It's just like when you're learning anything. If you're learning how to play the violin, if you pick up a violin, it's not going to make the sweetest melodies when you first pick it up.
Well, right.
But,
especially if I pick it up. So, all right. So share a little bit of that past life that you're talking about. That you say that you shared that past life with your husband, who now.
Oh, I should clarify. It wasn't just me that shared it with him. The both of us experienced it together.
Like as one?
He saw it, he experienced the past life, and I experienced it too. We both saw different things, but we both experienced it.
Ah, okay. And so what was it like? I mean, how do you defy it from maybe dreaming to actual, going somewhere? There's, I guess, other dimension, would it be?
Well, what I was explaining before is that we saw what is called the soul records. It's kind of like people are familiar with the Akashic records.
Right.
When they tap into or visit consciously the Akashic records, they can actually see past lives that they've had, because everything is stored there. It's almost like holographic. Like on the Akashic records, someone can see they'll enter a room, there will be sort of what looks almost like a movie screen, but it can be experienced almost three-dimensionally, where you can hear sights, sounds, feelings. You can even hear the thoughts of the people yourself in this past life as you're experiencing it. So with the soul plane, it's coming from a higher level, but it can be, you can have different senses involved, but it was really fascinating to see. I have to say that.
Well, it sounds like it. Now, you say 100,000 years ago, or about 100,000 years ago. So, was it this planet? Was it the same planet or another planet?
Actually, it wasn't 100,000 years ago. It was 100 million years ago.
100 million years ago.
Sorry. The name of the planet, we saw, what we experienced was, it was a very luminous planet with two suns, and it had a very high vibration feeling, and there was just a majestic, pristine forest, huge trees. These trees were thousands of years old. They had no roads. People actually, they had these spacecraft that they use instead of cars. They left the forest alone. And these superluminal spaceships would just zip around from one place to the next kind of fast. It was very futuristic and high-tech, but at the same time, they were very focused on harmony with nature and all of life. It's what's called a golden age. There are different ages or cycles that we go through. For example, there's Dark Ages, Silver Age, Copper, and Iron. Right now we're in an Iron Age. In Iron Ages, there's a lot of war and strife, diseases, discomfort. In a Golden Age, like we saw with this particular planet, it's more people are focused on positivity and love and serving life. It's sort of like people are in more of a positive cycle. So this particular planet that we saw at this particular time was going through a Golden Age cycle. And I could tell you a little bit about the people, the race, if you want.
Yes, absolutely. But now I have to ask quickly before we even get to that. So then 100 million years ago on this planet was a golden age where there was peace and harmony and all that existed.
The name of the planet was Ceres.
Oh, okay.
It was not on Earth. The planet was called Ceres.
I was going to say, that didn't sound like Earth.
No.
But yeah, okay. So Ceres was the planet. And
yes.
So, okay, yes. Tell me about the citizens of this planet.
Okay. Now, I realize this might sound strange because people aren't used to this sort of thing.
Here but, they are, actually.
They were...
So. And this... Go ahead.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
They were 24 feet tall, roughly 24 feet tall. They had psychic powers like clairvoyance, inner seeing, clairaudience, inner hearing, clairimpotence. They were, compared to Earth, they were like geniuses in their fields. And they were very universally, they were loving, very loving to all life forms. They had a sort of a telepathic communication with life in all its forms, with the planet, with the soul that is the planet itself. They had a very loving connection. And people, because they fed love to the planet, it returned to them, and they had extraordinary vitality and a very long lifespan. In this particular lifetime, because we're not like recounting artifacts, but it's actually a past life. My husband in that lifetime, he was about 24 feet tall, and he had blue eyes and like straight brown hair. He was about 800 years old, which in Earth years would be about 24 years old. And in that particular lifetime, I went by my spiritual name, which is Ga Shaiza. And Ga and Alan were very good friends. Ga was older in years, several thousand years old. He had snow white hair, and he wore a long robe, and he was also about 24 feet tall. He was also a spiritual teacher, what's called a living Vardan master. He didn't practice the different kinds of nature spirit paths, religions, and other types of practices, but he practiced what we call the secret teachings on this planet.
The secret teachings. Oh, you made one of my colleagues, Ryan Gable. His ears probably perking up. You said that's the name of his show. He gets into a lot of the ancient mystery, majestic kind of stuff. So so real interesting. So now just to give a little recap. So you actually had an out of body experience. And you went to a past life on a distant planet called Ceres.
Yes.
And so now it was a past life. So, I mean, would things still be going on there? I mean, are they still in existence?
Well, I would say that, in a sense, time is somewhat of an illusion. Different things can exist simultaneously, while at the same time they may or may not physically exist right now. That was a very long time ago. Many of those souls who were having that particular life have probably moved on to other kinds of experiences.
Yeah, I was going to say, time's an illusion for those that aren't growing old, I guess. But you're right, I get what you're saying. So then, and these people lived up to 800 years old.
Well, no. My husband, I know this sounds really far out, but my husband in that lifetime was 800 years old, and that's equivalent. Like if you look in dog years to people years, like there's a difference. So he was 800 years old, so that would be 24 years old in human years. So he was a young man. Gasheza was 4,800 years old, which would make him in his late 60s. So the lifespans were different. In golden ages, they tend to be longer than in dark ages.
I see. Well, yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's almost like we've been in a dark age ourselves here. I know you say it's the Iron Age, I guess, right?
Yes.
We're in now?
Yes, actually, you're right. We're in what's called, like you said, the Iron Age, and it's actually the beginning of the Iron Age. So within the Iron Age, it has mini cycles too.
All right. Now, what kind of transportation did they have on this other planet? I mean, were they gassing up at the 7-Eleven or no?
Oh, God. It's so funny. The way you put that is really funny.
Thank you.
Oh, man. Well, they weren't really gassing up at a 7-Eleven. I could say that. But no, the transportation was that, I can give you an example. Okay. A lot of people on Sirius had their own, I guess you could call them spaceships. And, there were times when, since Alan and Ga in that lifetime were good friends, they would take their spaceship sometimes to the mountains, and they'd use hoverboards to race each other down the mountain and everything, and at exhilarating speeds. And there's some interesting experiences, but yeah, the spaceship was interesting. I mean, it had a sort of a large crescent-shaped window where you had a panoramic view from below, and you could see everything for miles and miles. So they used spaceships, but they restricted certain travel so that people didn't really always go off the planet for off-world travel unless they had specialized training, because they had some bad experiences in the past. So most people who use their craft tended to use them on the planet.
And do we know what these things, I mean, how are they powered? What did they have propulsion systems or I mean, like? Actually,
to be honest, I wasn't an engineer on the planet at that time. I was more like I was a spiritual teacher. So that wasn't really my specialty specifically. So, but I know they had different kinds of interesting technology, like healing technology, but it didn't overwhelm their lives because they were very connected with connecting with life forms on a sort of astral spiritual level.
And it seems like they, being a peaceful people, that they were actually using technologies to heal and help people rather than suppress it for dollars like they do on this planet. But so, I mean, did they have anything to do with us now? I mean, if you had a past life there and now you're here, I guess there's some kind of like exchange thing going on. I often wondered if when we pass away, if, we leave this body, if maybe, people always say, well, we come back. I mean, not necessarily do we come back to this planet, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, well, actually, sometimes people have incarnations on different worlds, not just different worlds, but different levels of heavenly planes. And, it's an interesting thing to explore and become aware of. Usually when somebody does out-of-body travel, they end up learning about these things just as sort of a side thing that pops up. But yes, people have incarnations that they might not remember on other planets. If someone is really attracted to shows like Star Trek and they're fascinated by technology like you are, it could be that they've had past lives where they've dealt with these things before. So.
Well, yeah, I would have to guess if I have had past lives that it had something to do with what I'm doing now. I hope so. I really enjoy what I'm doing now. So, what type of I guess whose image were people in on this planet series? I mean, did they look more like our God or someone else's? Or, what did they look like?
The people on Sirius, they actually, they were basically, they looked humanoid, bipedal humanoid. They had the physical appearance that's maybe similar to humans, except they were a lot taller. They were 24 feet tall. They had 48 strands of DNA. They were very highly intelligent. Instead of their brain being segmented in parts communicating haphazardly, it was more holistic. And so they were, you could say, I guess, brilliant, like geniuses in a sense. But I wouldn't say that they weren't gods. And there's a tendency for people to look at other beings from other worlds and sort of like distort reality and because it's so what's the word? Because it's so shocking and surprising about the differences that it can make us put them on a pedestal. But in reality, the goal is not to worship other people, but to actually connect spiritually ourselves with these inner worlds, with heaven and with God.
I see. And now, why do you suppose you went to a past life 100 million years away, rather than, what about all the in-betweens? You say, I know time is kind of irrelevant, right? But, so yes. I guess when you get on the other side, would 100 million years be like a blink of an eye over there?
Well, I don't know about that. Probably not. When you experience it, doesn't feel like a blink of an eye. Right. But maybe to God it's a blink of an eye, but when you're going through it yourself, it doesn't feel that way, I don't think.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry. Can you repeat your question, Mike?
I was actually, now I've lost my train of thoughts. But I asked. My question was why 100 million years ago to a past life rather than maybe any past lives in between. My question was, is it a blink of an eye on the other side? These time.
Well, actually, I think the reason for this particular past life, it relates to the fact that, and this was fascinating, that we were studying the same exact thing today that we were studying back then on Planet Ceres. On Planet Ceres and today, we're studying the same teachings we studied before. And re-experiencing that past life was bringing some of that back. Not that one... really, the goal of it is to graduate from reincarnation and to move on spiritually to a higher level.
Yeah, okay. And we'll get into more of that for sure, because, everybody wants to know, at least they should be interested in the biggest questions really are, why are we here? And what happens when our bodies quit on us here? And, some think that that's it. That's it. When you're dead, you're dead. Others, like myself, have had experiences that some scientists will say is a chemical in the brain that caused it. Well, I disagree with that. But, we can agree to disagree, them and I. But, that's still, just because I had the experiences, I'm not, that doesn't, for me, it really tells me there is something after this life. However, I always do give a little consideration to the fact that it could have all been an illusion, and I still don't know what really goes on the other side. So it's definitely an interesting thing. But before we get into all that, and this might have something to do with it, you did mention studying secret teachings on Planet Ceres. And I thought maybe if you wanted to get into some of those secret teachings, that would be great. And that probably has something to do with knowing where we go, right?
Yeah. Actually, it was interesting. We actually even have my husband translated into human language he translated from telepathic language into human language actual things that were said in the class, like a lecture, which is interesting too, and I could share that later if you like as well.
Sure.
Basically, what it is that the essence of God is with all beings, but all beings are not with spirit. That spirit is waiting for us to be with it, not merely in an astral sense, but it will lead us back home to God, but we have to actually desire it. Otherwise, we get stuck or trapped. And basically, every person determines what level they want to experience God. On the lower levels of experiencing God, there's illusion mixed with Maya, or illusion mixed with reality. On the higher levels, it's just sort of like a direct experience where you can make contact with this light and sound which flows from God at higher levels. And it's this process or transition of going from spiritual childhood to spiritual adulthood. When you're a child, someone always, mommy, get your daddy, get me this, get me that. But when you're a spiritual adult, you learn how to do things for yourself. So one of the things that the secret teachings taught was that when God had classes and everything, it almost reminds me a little bit of Star Wars. It's not the best analogy, but you know how in Star Wars there's a master, sort of a master, who's working with students.
Right.
And he is training them to become masters themselves, sort of. But I'd say that in Star Wars, what they're studying, to me, that doesn't look like spirituality. It looks more like, spiritual politics / warfare / psychic magic. But what I'm talking about is actual spirituality. So it's completely different. But that whole student studying with a master relationship is the same kind of thing, where the teacher has this inner, how in the movie they show how the student has this inner telepathic communication with his teacher. Yeah. This is similar to how the teacher on series worked with his students. He had this telepathic and inner link with each one of them, and he would help them learn to actually leave their physical bodies. And instead of like what they do in the movie where they're fighting and everything, the person is leaving their physical body to learn how to return home to God. And when I say return home to God, I'm not talking about the entities that are the different types of entities that are in the lower levels of heaven. They can be mistaken for God. I'll share with you one thing about the secret teachings was that God Shaiza, when he would teach a class, he would point to a large chart, which was like a map of heaven. They called it today, and they called it back then, the God World's chart. And it would map out specific levels of heavenly planes, and both lower heavens and higher heavens. And the purpose of this is that when we have a good map, we can know, when we have an out-of-body experience, we can identify where we are. Because it's very, very easy to get lost in these different levels of heaven. Do you mind if I tell you the different levels?
Oh, not at all. I want to hear as much as I can. And you brought up Star Wars, and if you look at some of the scenes in Star Wars, like Obi-Wan Kenobi when he got struck down by Darth Vader in the Star Wars movie, he says he pretty much surrendered and says that he would be stronger and more powerful, once he was struck down and went to the other side. And they would have these spirits show up and talk to him, to Luke or whoever later. So, I mean, they did add that in with Star Wars. You did see that kind of sense of, when you're dead, you're not dead,
Yeah, but I do have to say this, because it's very easy to get this confused, is that there's a common idea. There's a common idea that people can only communicate with deceased masters. That, in the Star Wars, he's communicating with, I don't know, an ascended or a bodiless master who has a glowing light body. Well, what's different about the secret teachings is that it's like the phrase of one master named Peter Zask, where he says that an infant can't gain nourishment from a deceased mother. And it's the same with spiritual masters or spiritual teachers. And the reason for this is because there's a link up on different levels. Spiritually, there's a link up that takes place on different levels that cannot be made unless the person has a physical body. And then also, the teacher can only bring us to the level of heaven that he resides. So when we choose a teacher, in a sense, we're also choosing a destination. And so that's something very important to keep in mind. But actually, speaking of destinations, I can explain the different levels if you want to hear them.
Yes, please do. So this is the different levels of heaven?
Yes, these are different levels of heavenly planes. And so I'll put it like this. At the bottom of the chart that God was pointing to, Gashaiza was pointing to, it shows the physical plane, which is a green band. And obviously the physical plane is a plane of illusion, daily life. And then above it, a lot of people are familiar with the astral plane. And the astral plane is actually the heaven of emotion, and it corresponds with the astral body, which is the emotional body. What's significant about that is, so when people make a big transition from transmuting fear, anger, things like that, and then they become more positive and more positive, that is like an emotional growth. So that's the emotional body, the astral plane.
Then I grew emotionally because the last week, that's about where I've been. A lot more positive, but go ahead.
Oh, that's a good thing.
It is.
The astral plane is also the plane of near-death experiences and astral projection. It's also a plane of magic and miracles and psychic phenomenon. Also spirits, ghosts, paranormal, things like that. And there are different levels to the astral plane. The astral plane is huge. If you think about the physical universe contains, countless universes and planets and suns. It's huge. Well, if you can imagine that, then the astral plane is far larger than the physical universe. And so a lot of times when people talk about different dimensions, they're talking about levels within the astral plane because it's huge. And when it gets higher and higher, the vibration gets so much higher and the level of time and space and matter decreases and there's more spirit, so it gives a illusion of greater and greater freedom. But then above the astral plane is what's called the causal plane, and a lot of people are familiar with how the causal plane relates to the Akashic records, which are stored there. The causal plane is the plane of the heaven of memory, and it corresponds with the memory body. So it's sort of like the lower mental plane. So memory is a lower form of mental faculties. And so people that access these Akashic records, they are able to see past lives, past, future, present, and they can see it in a lot of detail. Then above the causal plane is what is called the mental plane, and I forgot to mention there are different colors of light and sound, so you can tell where you are. The astral plane has a white light, and it might have subtle pink to it, and you might hear the sound that sounds almost like the sea. The causal plane is like the sound of bells, and it's a white light with a soft orange. Almost looks golden, but it's orange. And then above it is the mental plane, which is a plane of even greater light and far less matter, so things manifest even faster there. And instead of astral travel, they do mind travel there. And the mental plane corresponds with the mental body. This is a place where people can experience what's called cosmic consciousness, where they feel a connection with a universal connection with all life, a oneness with all life. And it feels like a very, very high state, but it is not, it's still in the lower worlds. And also I should mention that in the mental plane is what's called the universal mind power, which is, Edgar Cayce would tap into what's called the universal mind power, and that's why he would know certain things. But one of the things Edgar Cayce didn't realize is that the universal mind power is actually negative in nature. And then there's the etheric plane, which is sort of like the dividing point between the lower and higher levels. So right after the etheric plane is a void, which like a region of void, and it's called the second grand division. And very few souls can make it past this second grand division. This void is very dark and difficult to pass through. And above that, we have, so like I'm saying, there's these lower worlds or lower heavens that can be people can have really profound mystical experiences in these heavens. Like you hear stories of near-death experience in the astral plane, and it can be incredible. The love people experience, the wisdom, being touched in a deep way. But when we go past the lower worlds are the heavens of reincarnation, where soul is still trapped. Above the second grand division are the pure positive God worlds. And these are heavens of just pure spirit, where, like that experience I shared with you, where I saw the soul plane, which is the first heaven in the pure positive God worlds, and it's just this breathtaking, brilliant white landscape that goes on for miles and miles. And when somebody reaches this level, they can actually see themselves freed of all these lower bodies, all these illusions, and they come to know who they truly are. It's like a realization of oneself as soul. Above that is the Alakalok, what you call the sixth plane. And again, this doesn't correspond to what people call dimensions. I've heard a lot of people talk about dimensions. This is a completely different system of spiritual planes, and the terms dimensions and planes don't have the same definition. So when I talk about the sixth plane, I'm not talking about the sixth dimension. That's a completely different place. And then the Agam, if I skip ahead a little, the Agam Lock is a place of brilliant whiteness that burns away impurities. The light is so magnificent and pure and brilliant. And there's something there called the lotus of fiery light, and we can, bring to the lotus of fiery light our burdens, that it will burn those up. So the fifth plane is the plane of self-realization. And then finally, when we get to the Anami Lock, that is the first heaven of God realization. Now, when I say God realization, there's a lot of mythology and different beliefs about what that word means. But what I mean by God realization is having a personal experience of God, not just, looking at a book and substituting a book for God, or substituting, words for God, but actual experience of God. So Anami Lock is the first. It's a pure, white, gentle universe of pure light, soft light, and it has a whirlpool sound. And in this world, it's the earlier levels of God realization. So all of these, God would teach his students and point to this chart with a pointer and share with them how they could visit each of these levels of heavenly planes. And on each of these levels of heavenly planes is a temple of golden wisdom. And he would tell them which teacher teaches on each plane and which the name of each of these temples of golden wisdom, so that they could actually have sort of, you could say, a spiritual education.
Okay. And so now your knowledge of these different planes of heaven would be based on a chart that was shown to you by God, you say?
God works with different masters, with different spiritual teachers to help them leave their body and become aware of these planes.
But who is Gashai Za? I mean, is this somebody who's running the entire show? I mean, is anything to do with Gashai Za or no?
No, what it is there's always There's always a living Vardan master, always a spiritual traveler that is living and help souls. There was one, in each era, in each age. I'll give you an example. In ancient China, there was a master named Light Si, and he taught people, his students during ancient China. During ancient Egypt, there was a master named Gopal Das, and he taught students in ancient Egypt. During the time of the ancient Greeks, there was a living Vardan master, a spiritual traveler, and one of them was Plato. Some of the philosophers were spiritual travelers, and they used that philosophical role as a way of being acceptable to the public. But poetically, though, for instance, Plato would express about out-of-body travel, but he couldn't say it directly, so he used analogies like flies like a bird. He's referring to out-of-body travel. So basically, there's always a living teacher, but the masses are not usually ready to learn about the teacher, only the individual. It's not the masses that can reach higher states of consciousness, only the individual. So Ga Shaizat, in that past life on Ceres, and so Ga Shaizat was teaching people about this. He desires that the individual himself can reach mastership, that he can learn to reach self-realization and God-realization and spiritual mastership. Just like, in the film Star Wars, I don't like using this analogy, but in the film Star Wars, the teacher is teaching the student how to reach higher states of consciousness himself.
Right. Okay. All right. And Heather, we got to take a break here, so we'll leave it right there. And then after the break, we'll come back and we'll touch on this some more. I've got a lot of questions, and if anybody out there, when we return, if you have questions, you're welcome to call in at 803-392-4566, Skype ID LNM Radio. I'm Michael Vera. This is Late Night in the Midlands. My guest, Heather Giamboi, I think I'm saying that right, telling us about astral travel. Out of body, past lives, 100 million years ago. A lot there, folks. We'll be back. Don't go away.
I made love to an alien near Roswell last night. We strolled along together in the pale moonlight. I had a funny feeling that something wasn't right. I made love to an alien last night. When she gripped my hand, I was feeling mighty fine, but her fingers with mine would not intertwine. I bent down and gazed into her eyes. They were big as donuts and blacker than the sky. She said, I'm feeling lonely. I said, Lord, so am I. We'll stroll along together, but we won't question why. That ground beneath your feet is flashing red and white, and sprouting little mushrooms left and right. Then she threw me down and put me on my back. To tell the truth, I thought I'd seen my last. But she settled down and snuggled in my arms, and I made love to that maid from the stars.
The LNM Radio Network offers a moderated chat room at www.latenightinthemidlands.com. Just click the chat and listen page from the drop-down menu at the top of any page on the website, or click the Listen Live button at the top of the homepage at www.latenightinthemidlands.com.
Why subscribe to Late Night in the Midlands, you ask? Well, I'll tell you why. Late Night in the Midlands covers everything, and through the thousands of expert guests who have joined Michael Vera on his show, come pieces of the big puzzle, which started many years ago. Michael and his guests reveal information dating back to the beginning of time. To this very moment, Michael Vera not only brings you the best guests with the best information, but Michael is not afraid to call out those who are less than honest. You see, in this day and age, we need a radio show we can count on and a radio host we can trust to expose the truth one show at a time. So, become a late nighter and subscribe now. Talk radio like no other. Late Night in the Midlands, bringing the truth back to talk radio.
Attention LNM Radio Network listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the LNM Radio Network by calling 605-562-4203? No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 605-562-4203 to listen to the LNM Radio Network on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Become a late nighter without the late nights. And subscribe now to help Late Night in the Midlands bring you the best guests with the best information. On the East Coast of the United States, from the capital city, Columbia, South Carolina, you're listening to Late Night in the Midlands with your host, Michael Vera. To talk to Michael Vera, dial 803-392-4566 or around the world on Skype. Just use Skype ID LNM Radio.
All right, we're back. This is Late Night in the Midlands. I'm Michael Vera. My guest Heather is linked up on LateNightInTheMidlands.com. You could go to the homepage. You'll see a picture slider, and just click on the photo. You'll see her photo there on the picture slider, and that'll take you there. Or you can go to our schedule page, and you could click on the website link there as well. And, of course, we always add the links to the archive after the show, which are usually available about an hour, within an hour after the show ends. And, folks, don't forget, Friday, of course, we simulcast on YouTube. And I'm going to experiment a little next week. May go a full week next week, simulcasting on YouTube. Yeah, I'm looking at possibly doing the entire week next week. On, of course, LNM Radio, the LNM Radio Network it's our mothership. That's that's what really matters to me. But there are some people who say they find it easier to tune in using YouTube, using Google. We'll do the best we can, and that starts Friday. Of course, we always do Fridays, and we give it out for free. And we have Planet X as our topic this Friday. So you'll want to tune in for that if you're still waiting for Planet X to come by and destroy everything. I know some of you, you're praying for it, and while others of you are fearing it. We'll talk about it on Friday. All right, the website, LateNightInTheMidlands.com. Go on over, become a late nighter. Be informed, and by all means, inform others, please. All right, that's how without you, there's no us. I mean it. I mean it to death. That's the truth. So, folks, we hope that you'll keep spreading the word and, bring more people, bring us to more people's attention. And, what else do I want to get? The call-in number, I guess, is all that's left before we get back to things. 803-392-4566. Skype ID LNM Radio. All right. And I can also take questions in our chat room. All right. So let's get back to it. Heather, we are back. And so I guess one question would be, how do you know? I mean, because there are those scientists out there who will say that it's all chemical imbalances and stuff like that. How do you know? What kind of confirmation did you get for yourself? And again, it's your journey, it's your experience. So what convinced you that it wasn't just some trick of the mind, or that you were actually speaking with, some worry about speaking to demons or bad people if you connect in that way. So, I mean, how do you know? any of that? How do you know that it really happened, for one? And how do you know who you were actually speaking with?
Well, how can I put it? It's sort of like on the lower levels of heaven, there's a lot of illusion that takes place. There are actually a lot of entities that are very powerful and use magic, and they appear as though they are God, or they appear as though they are of the highest nature. But in actuality, they're sort of like tricking souls into being trapped spiritually. That's why when people talk about people are doing out-of-body travel, that's negative. Actually, astral projection can potentially be dangerous. I don't do astral projection because there are certain dangers involved in that. I do something called soul or tusa movement, which is moving out of body and going to the higher levels, especially the higher levels of heaven. And the reason that I know is it's just like anything. When you had your out-of-body experience and you know that it's real because you were there, there's no doubt in my consciousness that I've had experiences where I've separated from my physical body and I was dwelling as soul. And it's a knowingness, it's an experience. Science, actually, I think, can be in itself be like a religion, and it can be limited in a sense because we're focusing just on the mind, and the mind is very limited. I could give you an example of what I mean about getting beyond the mind and science and an out-of-body experience I had.
Sure, yeah. Oh, yeah. Please do.
This is kind of wild, but I remember once I was sitting at a large conference center, what would you call it, convention center, and there were thousands of people, and I was just feeling incredible love for all of these people, like an incredible love, an awe, inspiration, a real deep appreciation. The next thing I knew, I found myself hovering on the ceiling 200 feet above, and I had this bird's eye view where I could see everybody below. And I was startled for a moment, like, whoa, I'm on the ceiling. And then when I looked below me, I saw pure soul, my true nature. And then under me, right below me was this other body that was very brilliant. And then another body below that, like the mental body, then the causal body, and then below that the astral body, what some people call the light body. Mm-hmm. And then in the chair was my physical body sitting. So I saw these 5 bodies below me. And they were sort of like, I don't know how to put it, sort of connected. And so when I realized this, wow, I was sort of startled and shocked. And the next thing I knew, these bodies fit together almost like those Russian dolls. Bloop, 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 until I was in my body. And I would say that the perception of soul, because we're each a spark of God that has the qualities of God, wisdom, love, power, freedom. The reason that I know is because as my pure, true self soul, its soul is much more powerful than your physical mind. When people rely on their mind for knowledge and understanding, it can be very limiting. And in fact, I would say that it's the other way around. That person is more likely to be delusional if they're focused on being trapped in the physical reality than if they are in their soul, if they're connected with their true self, because the physical body is like a costume. It's almost like a diving suit that if you were to, the coarse vibrations of the lower worlds require a body so that we can actually interact with this world.
My good friend Ira calls it a meat suit.
Yeah.
So yeah, he calls it a meat suit. Sounds kind of gross to me to think of it that way, but that's basically what it is, right?
Yeah, so if you want to rely on meat suit, you can, but I wouldn't trust it.
Well, no, and it's not going to last. Life goes by in a blink of an eye. I think most people can agree with me. Unless you're 19 or 20, you think you've got the world's, you're never going to get old, but you'll see.
Yeah.
So it happens. But now you talked about a void. Like there's this area that's a void. And Well, even before we get to that, you say astral projection, you do actual soul travel. So what is the difference between soul travel and astral projection? I mean, I've always thought with astral projection, it's like they say their consciousness or something travels, but I mean, it would have to be the essence of you. But what makes that different for you?
What actually makes it different is just like that example I gave you where there were these different bodies below me. The astral body is like a lower body. It is made of a tiny bit of matter mixed with spirit. And because it's the false self, when people travel around in this false self, not directly centered in soul, it can cause problems. Because, well, for one, there are parts of the astral plane that are sort of like going to bad neighborhoods where you wouldn't want to go at night or something. But what makes astral projection different than soul movement or Tusa travel is that astral projection is using the false self to travel with, which is unnatural. But Tusa or soul movement is actually where we're a spark of God. It's our true self. So we are actually moving in our true self, which is soul. And it's being done in a way that's in accord with the will of divine spirit. So it's not being done in an unnatural way. And also the person is under guidance and protection, and they're shown step by step how to make progress with it. Whereas in the astral plane, sometimes people are, not always, but sometimes people are learning from trial and error, and there can be some dangerous things that can happen in the astral plane. But soul or Tusa travel is a lot safer, and it's also natural. It's the natural way that God designates for soul to return to it.